Think about the last time you truly lost your temper. Chances are, it was not over a massive life crisis. It was during a trivial argument with someone who simply refused to understand a basic, undeniable truth. Highly intelligent people fall into this exact trap every single day. We mistakenly believe that if we just find the perfect combination of words, the other person will finally see reality. But some people do not want clarity, they want a reaction. They want your energy. It is time to stop donating your mental clarity to those who thrive in chaos. In this video, we will explore the profound difference between a sincere debate and an emotional trap, and how you can permanently protect your inner peace. 1. The illusion of the argument. The most brutal mistake intelligent people make is this: they keep explaining themselves to individuals who are fundamentally committed to misunderstanding them. When you possess a deeply analytical mind, your default assumption is that conflict is simply a lack of data. You think to yourself, if I can just find the exact right words, if I can just articulate my point more clearly, or provide one more logical example, they will finally see the reality. This is a dangerous illusion. You are operating under the false belief that every foolish person actually wants a resolution. They do not. There is a profound difference between a genuine breakdown in communication and being dragged onto an emotional battlefield. Communication requires two willing participants aiming for mutual understanding and growth. A battlefield, on the other hand, only requires one person looking for friction and another person naive enough to step into the crossfire. When you engage in a heated debate with someone who lacks self-awareness, you are no longer communicating, you are actively participating in their internal chaos. Some people are not confused because the truth is hidden from them, they are confused because confusion serves as a protective shield for their ego. It is their armor against accountability and change. You can bring the brightest lamp into a dark room, but you cannot force a blindfolded person to open their eyes. If you stand there, exhausted, holding the light and begging them to see the reality right in front of them, you are no longer acting out of wisdom. You are simply burning through your own life force. You are wasting your fire on a lost cause. Listen closely. Your intelligence is never proven by the number of arguments you manage to win. That is a game for the immature ego, a fragile part of the human psyche that desperately needs to defeat others to feel validated. A truly trained mind recognizes that some debates are nothing more than psychological traps wearing the polite mask of a conversation. Your intelligence is proven entirely by how much peace you manage to protect. When you recognize that an argument is spiraling into a toxic, irrational loop, walking away is not a concession of defeat. It is the ultimate demonstration of intellectual mastery. It is the profound realization that some people are simply not worth the exorbitant cost of your sanity. Every single time you refuse to step into their arena, you reclaim your emotional autonomy and leave them fighting their own shadows. 2. Understanding emotional vampires. To truly protect yourself, you must understand the underlying psychology of the people who constantly initiate these draining interactions. Why do certain individuals seem to thrive on making you miserable? It comes down to a harsh but illuminating reality: peace feels like an unbearable void to them. Because they have not built anything of substance or value inside themselves, their internal world is empty. For these individuals, silence is deafening and terrifying. They desperately need noise, conflict, and friction just to feel alive. Drama is their primary currency, and provoking you is how they manufacture their own sense of importance. When they successfully drag a calm, intelligent, and put-together person down into the mud with them, it gives them an intoxicating, albeit temporary, illusion of power. This is where you must be incredibly observant. Emotional vampires are cunning in how they extract your resources. Some people do not ask questions because they genuinely want answers. They ask questions because they want your energy. They use conversation as a tool to pull you entirely off your center. They will deliberately play dumb, make you endlessly explain yourself, demand that you repeat what was already clear, and intentionally twist your words out of context. They are not looking for a resolution, they are looking for a reaction. They are attempting to siphon your focus and replace it with what we can call empty energy, a state of agitated, useless exhaustion. Their ultimate goal is to poke, prod, and push your boundaries until you finally snap. They want you to become frustrated, emotional, and reactive. The moment you raise your voice or lose your composure, they have won the game they set up. They will immediately sit back, point at your completely justified anger, and calmly say, "Look at how you are acting. See? You are the problem." This is exactly how foolishness conquers intelligence. It does not win by being factually right or morally superior, it wins by making grounded people lose their balance. When you recognize this psychological mechanism, everything changes. You stop seeing a debate that you need to win, and you start seeing an insecure ego throwing a tantrum. Once you realize that the interaction is not a search for truth but a feeding frenzy for an emotional vampire, you can finally stop serving yourself up on a silver platter. 3. The weapon of the pause and restraint. When someone says something incredibly shallow, insulting, or completely devoid of self-awareness, your immediate biological and psychological impulse is to correct them. That impulse feels righteous. It feels like justice. You want to deploy your vocabulary, your logic, and your intellect to crush their ignorance on the spot. But look deeper into that burning desire. More often than not, the desperate need to correct someone is just the ego wearing a teacher's robe. Part of you still cannot tolerate being misunderstood. Part of you still craves validation and agreement, even from people who do not possess the capacity to respect the truth. This is the hidden vulnerability that intelligent people must actively destroy, the need to be recognized by those who cannot even recognize their own flaws. A diamond does not beg a stone to understand its value, and you should not beg a foolish person to acknowledge your intellect. When dealing with chaotic individuals, your greatest weapon is not a sharper comeback, it is the discipline of restraint. Restraint is often misunderstood as passivity or weakness, but in reality, it is strength under absolute command. Any animal can react when provoked. Any insecure person can shout, escalate a situation, and spend 20 minutes furiously trying to prove a point. But to feel the adrenaline flood your system, to feel the heat rise in your chest, and still consciously choose your response, that is the epitome of self-mastery. To hear blatant disrespect and completely refuse to become disrespectful in return is how you maintain your psychological sovereignty. This mastery lives in a very specific place, the pause. When someone is being foolish, force yourself to pause before you open your mouth. That brief, Silent space is a sword that cuts the invisible string they are trying to attach to your nervous system. Without that pause, their words control your heart rate, their tone dictates your facial expressions, and their ignorance hijacks your breathing. Intelligence cannot remain purely intellectual, it must be physical. You can read every philosophy book in the world, but if your heart races and your voice shakes every time someone challenges you, your knowledge is merely decoration. In that crucial pause, shift your attention entirely to your physical body. Lower your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Let your breath drop deep into your stomach. Maintain a calm, steady gaze. Rushing to defend yourself is how you hand the steering wheel over to their chaos. A slow, measured response, or the choice to not respond at all, is a profoundly powerful act of defiance. In the pause, you remind yourself of one absolute truth: you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. 4. Discernment, ignorance versus arrogance. One of the greatest vulnerabilities of a highly intelligent and empathetic person is the assumption that everyone possesses the same innate desire to learn and grow. Because you value knowledge and self-improvement, you naturally project those values onto others. You see a flaw in someone's logic or a gap in their understanding, and you immediately view it as an opportunity for education. But intelligence without strict discernment can quickly become a doorway for emotional abuse. To protect your energy, you must master the critical art of discernment, the ability to recognize the vast, undeniable difference between sincere ignorance and arrogant foolishness. How you respond to someone should depend entirely on which of these two categories they fall into. Some people are simply uninformed because they lack experience, exposure, or access to the right knowledge. Their ignorance is clumsy, but it is deeply sincere. They might ask overly simple questions, make obvious mistakes, or struggle to grasp complex concepts right away, but their minds remain open. When you encounter this type of ignorance, the only appropriate response is extreme patience and gentle compassion. Do not mock them. Do not punish them for not knowing what took you years to learn. Using your intellect to belittle someone who is genuinely trying to understand is not a sign of strength, it is a sign of deep insecurity. Intelligence without compassion rapidly decays into arrogance, and arrogance is just another, more sophisticated form of stupidity. On the opposite end of the spectrum is arrogant foolishness. This is the individual who is actively proud of their refusal to learn. They do not ask questions to seek clarity, they ask questions to mock the answers. They laugh at what they do not understand because mockery is significantly easier than personal growth. They use their loud, abrasive opinions as a substitute for actual depth, and they view any attempt at genuine education as a personal attack. When a person is genuinely willing to learn, you give them your patience. But when a person is proud of not learning, you must give them absolute distance. Many intelligent people exhaust themselves because they refuse to accept that someone is proudly foolish. They keep trying to find the perfect metaphor, the ultimate statistic, or the right tone of voice to finally break through the barrier. But you must understand this hard truth: you do not water a dead branch and call it gardening. You do not keep knocking on a completely locked door and call it loyalty. And you absolutely do not keep explaining the truth to someone who directly benefits from not understanding it and call it wisdom. Discernment is not about judging someone as inferior, it is about clearly assessing their capacity for growth. Judgment says, "I am better than you." Discernment simply says, "Walking down this path with you will waste my life." When you recognize arrogant foolishness, withdraw your effort immediately. Save your water for seeds that actually want to grow. 5. The architecture of iron boundaries. Many highly intelligent individuals suffer immensely, not because they lack cognitive ability, but because they have powerful minds paired with incredibly weak boundaries. You can analyze everyone, understand everyone, forgive everyone, and explain everyone's trauma, but you fundamentally fail to protect yourself from them. You fall into the trap of endless accommodation. You tell yourself, "If I just stay calm a little longer, they will understand. If I give them one more example, they will finally get it. If I change my tone, they will stop attacking." It is time to face one of the most uncomfortable, liberating truths in human psychology. Some people understand you perfectly, they simply do not care. That sentence is painful because it completely strips away the fantasy of control. It forces you to realize that the problem is not your wording, it is not your tone, and it is not a lack of logical evidence. The problem is their absolute refusal to meet reality honestly. They benefit from misunderstanding you. They thrive in the chaos that their confusion creates. When you finally accept this harsh reality, your life instantly becomes lighter. You stop carrying on dead conversations. You stop trying to make careless people careful. You stop trying to make cruel people gentle. And most importantly, you stop trying to force small minds to honor large ideas. We have been deeply conditioned to believe that being a good person means being endlessly accessible and infinitely patient. This is a toxic lie. Goodness without boundaries rapidly becomes self-betrayal. Compassion without wisdom is simply a doorway for abuse. Patience without strict limits is nothing more than permission for others to continuously disrespect you. You can entirely respect someone's humanity without giving them unrestricted access to your peace. Building iron boundaries means recognizing that your time is not public property. Your mind is not a public road for anyone to drive their garbage trucks through. Your emotional energy is not a charity for individuals who actively refuse to grow. Dealing with foolish people does not mean you have to become a cold, bitter, or hardened person. It means you must become exact. You must become exact with your time, exact with your energy, and exact with your words. When a boundary needs to be set, you set it firmly and without a trembling voice. Sometimes the most powerful sentence you can speak is, "That is not acceptable," not because you are raging with anger, but because the boundary is crystal clear. You do not need hatred to create distance, and you do not need a dramatic, explosive ending to simply stop participating. You just withdraw your access, lock the gate, and let them be mad at the wall. 6. Recognizing patterns over words. Intelligent people are often deeply empathetic, which makes them highly susceptible to one of the most dangerous psychological traps, the illusion of the apology. Because you possess a deep capacity to self-reflect and change, you naturally assume that when other people apologize, they are doing the same thing. But with chaotic and foolish individuals, an apology is rarely a promise of changed behavior. More often than not, it is simply a manipulation tactic used to hit the reset button on your patience. Foolish people often promise change only after the damage is already done. They suddenly become humble when they sense you are finally packing your bags. They start listening only when your patience has completely evaporated. Do not allow yourself to get hypnotized by a fleeting moment of softness after a long, exhausting history of chaos. A brief period of good behavior is not a revelation, it is an emotional bribe. If you keep accepting these crumbs of decency as proof that they have fundamentally changed, you will spend your entire life trapped in a cycle of abuse, forgiveness, and disappointment. You must stop being easily impressed by words and start deeply respecting evidence. A pattern is the truth repeated over time. If someone repeatedly disrespects your clearly stated boundaries and then acts entirely surprised when you get upset, that is not confusion. If someone repeatedly creates unnecessary drama and then calls you too sensitive for reacting to it, that is not honesty. It is manipulation dressed up as innocence. A foolish person can speak fluently like a victim immediately after behaving exactly like a tyrant. They can use therapy language, intellectual jargon, or spiritual buzzwords to cleverly hide a profound lack of character. Do not be fooled by the beautiful decoration. Watch the fruit. A tree is known exclusively by what it produces, not by what it claims to be. If a relationship consistently produces exhaustion, anxiety, guilt, and disrespect, do not romanticize it. Do not call it love, do not call it friendship, and do not call it family duty. Call it exactly what it is, a drain. When you finally stop listening to the words and start acting strictly on the patterns, something fascinating happens. Foolish people will always reveal their true nature the moment you stop feeding their ego. When you withdraw your energy and stop endlessly explaining yourself, they will quickly accuse you of being cold. When you stop reacting emotionally to their provocations, they will label you arrogant. When you stop chasing them to repair the connection, they will say you have changed. And they are absolutely right, you have changed. You have stopped bleeding for people who call the knife wound a simple misunderstanding. Let them paint you as the villain in their story if it helps them sleep at night. Your job is not to manage their perception of you, your job is to protect your peace based on the undeniable reality of their actions. 7. The ultimate ego check. It is incredibly easy to point the finger outward, to analyze the toxic patterns of those around us, and to diagnose the foolishness of the modern world. But true intellectual and emotional mastery requires a much harder, far more uncomfortable practice, turning the magnifying glass inward. If you consider yourself an intelligent person, you must be hyper-aware of a very subtle, highly seductive trap, the addiction to feeling superior. Many intelligent people secretly enjoy being surrounded by foolishness, even as they loudly complain about it. They mock shallow individuals, roll their eyes at the drama, and vent about how exhausting their social circles are. Yet, they consciously choose to remain in environments where stupidity is the norm. They keep giving their time to people they fundamentally do not respect. Why? Because it is comfortable. Standing next to a broken wall makes you feel tall without requiring you to actually grow. When you surround yourself with chaos and incompetence, you get to play the role of the savior, the smartest person in the room, the voice of reason. It allows you to feel powerful and special without ever having to face the terrifying challenge of reaching your actual potential. This is not intelligence, this is ego-driven cowardice hiding behind intellectual arrogance. The true measure of intelligence is not how quickly you can spot the stupidity in others. The ultimate measure is how ruthlessly you identify and remove your own. You must ask yourself the hard questions. Where are you foolish? Where do you continually repeat the same pain, yet miraculously expect a different result? Where are you still handing out third, fourth, and fifth chances to people who have already given you a mountain of evidence? Where do you stay silent out of fear when you know you should speak, and where do you argue furiously when you know you should just walk away? Where are you using your massive intellect not to build a better life, but to cleverly justify your own anxiety and fear of change? This is where the real, agonizing work begins. It is painful to identify foolishness within yourself, but the truly trained mind bows to that pain. You must understand a profound psychological truth. Every chaotic person outside of you can only disturb what remains undisciplined inside of you. If a foolish person can shatter your peace with a single thoughtless sentence, do not just blame their sentence. Study your own reaction. Study the deep-seated wound that flared up. Study the fragile pride that desperately demanded their respect. Study the profound insecurity that still needed their agreement to feel safe. The foolish person may have walked up and knocked on the door, but it was something broken inside of you that actually turned the handle and let them in. Realizing this does not excuse their toxic behavior, but it completely bulletproofs you. When you stop using other people's flaws to distract from your own inner work, you strip them of their power over you entirely. 8. Guarding your inner temple. You cannot control the number of foolish, chaotic people in the world. They will always exist. But you have absolute, uncompromising control over the number of foolish exchanges you allow yourself to enter. You have control over how long you remain available, and you have control over whether you build your day around your life's purpose or around someone else's reaction. Most people do not lose their potential in one giant, dramatic failure. They lose their lives in tiny, daily surrenders of attention. A passive-aggressive comment pulls them. A rumor pulls them. A disrespectful tone pulls them into a 3-hour mental spiral. By the evening, they are completely exhausted, not because they worked deeply on something meaningful, but because they reacted constantly to meaningless noise. You must guard your attention like a sacred gate. Everything you give your attention to enters you. Every toxic person you entertain becomes part of your inner climate. Do not let someone else's foolishness become the weather inside your mind. Before you speak, before you type out that long paragraph, ask yourself, does this conversation deserve my life? Because that is exactly what attention is. It is your life force. Every single minute you spend arguing with foolishness is a minute deliberately stolen from strengthening your future. Every hour you spend trying to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you is an hour you did not spend building your business, healing your body, or mastering your craft. You are quite literally paying for nonsense with pieces of your destiny. This is why the most intelligent, highly actualized people learn to be ruthlessly selective. Selection is not arrogance. Selection is sheer survival. They select their conversations. They select their environments. They select their battles, and very often, they select silence. They do not live with their doors wide open to every passing wind. They do not allow random, unhealed minds to walk in and leave muddy footprints all over their inner temple. Take an honest inventory of your life right now. Who drains you and gives absolutely nothing back? Who creates a hurricane of confusion every time you try to establish a little bit of peace? Who makes you feel guilty simply for requiring basic human respect? Your body already knows the answers. You are not confused, you are just afraid of what the truth will require you to do. The truth will require distance. It will require letting people believe a completely false narrative about you without rushing to correct them. It may even require becoming profoundly lonely for a while. But hear this clearly, high-value loneliness paired with absolute peace is infinitely better than cheap company paired with constant disrespect. Do not fear the profound quiet that arrives after you finally remove the noise. At first, it will feel terrifyingly empty because your nervous system has become physically addicted to the disturbance. You might even mistake the absence of drama for boredom. Stay with the quiet. Let the silence detox you. In that space, your intelligence will become a tool for your own creation rather than a weapon for your defense. 9. The ultimate choice. At the end of the day, dealing with foolishness is not about changing the world, it is about mastering yourself. You are the sole architect of your own peace. You are the gatekeeper of your own energy. Every single time you consciously choose to walk away from a pointless argument, you are not surrendering, you are leveling up. You are actively choosing your long-term future over a temporary, cheap ego boost. The undisciplined mind reacts to everything, bleeding out its precious life force on people who will never appreciate the sacrifice. But the trained, disciplined mind stops and asks one incredibly simple, life-altering question: does this moment deserve the price of my breath? Make the unwavering choice today to stop being the emotional cushion for the chaos of others. Stop being the endless explainer, the eternal patient one, the savior of toxic relationships that only survive because you are willing to absorb all the discomfort. You are not here to be a sponge for the world's unresolved trauma. You are here to build something magnificent with your life. Become exact. Reclaim your fire. Let the noise fade into the background and step fully into the profound, quiet power of your own intelligence. If this message resonated with you, if it gave you the exact clarity you needed to finally set that boundary and protect your inner temple, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share your experience. What is the one iron boundary you are committing to setting today? If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the Buddha Coha channel for more deep dives into mastering your psychology, protecting your energy, and elevating your life. Until next time, stay grounded, stay exact, and above all else, fiercely protect your peace.